There are a lot of videos on the internet about how to build a better work ethic, and not too many about the proper view of rest. It seems that when it comes to rest, we as believers don't often think deeply about what the Bible has to say about it, and if we're not careful, we can confuse biblical rest for sinful laziness. Thankfully, God gives us clear guidelines for us to consider and apply to our daily lives on this topic. We see in Genesis 2 that God took the seventh day, after 6 days of creative work, to rest, to set for us an example of intentional and measured rest. We also see the God-man himself, Jesus, exemplify a healthy prioritization of rest in his human life here on earth. Throughout Scripture, we see a positive view of rest as a balancing necessity to the exhaustion which comes with work. Rest is seen as not only the bearer of physical recovery and spiritual refreshment, but also as a prime opportunity for deep times of prayer and meditation. We even pick up on some practical wisdom from Jesus' example in the Gospels about the value of finding a peaceful and often secluded place for rest. Jesus even set aside times for rest in the normal hectic rhythm of his ministry responsibilities and took opportunities for extended rest periods when necessary. Rest, in other words, is a good thing when it's practiced with intentionality and moderation. The trouble comes when we distort this good gift and turn it into something sinful, laziness. Of all the books of the Bible which warn us about the dangers of laziness, Proverbs might be the most powerful and clear. In Proverbs 10, we see that laziness is really poorly timed rest. He who gathers in the summer is a son who acts insightfully, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully. Proverbs 20 verse 4 echoes the same truth. The sluggard does not plow from winter on, so he begs during harvest and has nothing. You see, it's not the act itself. There's nothing wrong with sleeping in the winter when there are no crops to be harvested. It's sleeping in the summer when the crops are out, they're waiting to be harvested, that makes it sinful. There's nothing wrong with not plowing during the summer and fall. That's not when that sort of work should be done. It's not plowing during the late winter and spring that's lazy, because that's when that work needs to be done. Is there work to be done right now? If so, Proverbs tells us, urges us to do it. If there's not, then rest. Laziness, fundamentally, is poorly timed rest. Proverbs also teaches us that laziness is deceptively tempting. The beginning of laziness is often well-intentioned rest, isn't it? Proverbs 6, 9 through 11, "How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest? Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your want like an armed man." Laziness doesn't always look like laziness. It's often couched in the veneer of a little rest. It gradually pulls us in until we're so drunk on rest that we fail to see the foolishness of our lazy state, and we end up making excuses to defend ourselves, like what the sluggard says in Proverbs 22:13. "There's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the streets." But laziness isn't the ultimate consequence of itself. It brings about even worse circumstances into our lives. Laziness leads to continual craving without any real satisfaction. Proverbs 13:4, "The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing." Laziness also leads to a distortion of the perception of value. Proverbs 12:27, "A slack-handed man does not roast his prey, but the wealth of a man is precious for the diligent." The lazy man doesn't even rightly value the little that he has, in other words. But for the diligent worker, when he achieves wealth due to hard work, he rightly values it because he rightly values hard labor and effort. Proverbs even tells us that laziness leads to disappointed employers and a destroyed reputation. Proverbs 10, "Like the vinegar to the teeth and like smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him." And ultimately, in the end, after laziness takes its toll on a person's mind, it results in the self-deception of the sluggard himself. He ends up being lost in his laziness and has no sense of how to get out of it because he's taught himself to ignore wisdom. Proverbs 26:16. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can respond with a discreet answer. Will you heed these warnings from Proverbs and cultivate a healthy, measured, intentional practice of rest? Or will you allow yourself to fall into the trap of laziness and bear the consequences which follow?